There is an ancient practice found across cultures that never had contact with each other. West African rituals, European folk traditions, Native American ceremonies, ancient Mediterranean customs. All of them placed salt at doorways, under beds, in room corners, and sometimes in shoes. Most people either dismiss it as superstition or expect literal magic. Both miss the point. Carl Jung believed these rituals weren't about the supernatural. They were psychological symbols that appeared across cultures because they reflected something universal about the human mind. The ritual doesn't change the salt. It changes the person. Today, we'll explore why, and by the end, you'll see ancient rituals in a completely different way. 1. What salt actually meant, across every culture that used it. Before we go into Jung's psychology, we have to understand what salt meant. Not what we think it means. Not the modern association with seasoning, with sodium, with the health warning on the nutrition label. What it meant to every culture that treated it as sacred. And the meaning, across every culture, was remarkably consistent. Salt preserved. In a world without refrigeration, without the modern chemistry of preservation, salt was the substance that prevented decay, that kept what was real from dissolving into corruption, that maintained the integrity of something against the forces that would destroy it. Salt purified. It was used in wound treatment, in ritual cleansing, in the preparation of sacred spaces. It removed what was contaminating. It clarified what had become clouded. Salt revealed truth. In many ancient traditions, sharing salt with someone was a covenant, a binding of honesty between parties. To eat someone's salt was to be bound to them in truth. To betray someone whose salt you had eaten was considered one of the gravest possible violations. Salt marked boundaries, placed at thresholds, in doorways, at the edges of sacred spaces. It marked the line between what was protected and what was outside the protection. And salt endured. Unlike almost every other substance in the ancient world, salt did not change, did not decompose, did not become something other than what it was. It was itself, permanently and completely. Now, Jung would not ask you to believe in the supernatural efficacy of these properties. He would ask you to notice what they represent psychologically. Preservation, purification, truth, boundary, permanence. These are not arbitrary associations. They are the projections, in Jung's precise sense of that word, of psychological qualities that the human psyche has always needed and always known it needed. The symbol of salt is not about a mineral. It is about the psychological qualities that mineral was used to represent. And the ritual of placing it in the shoes, the things that carry you through the world, is not about what happens to the salt. It is about what happens to the person who performs the act with genuine understanding of what they are doing. 2. What shoes meant, and why the ritual was always about the threshold. In every culture that developed the practice of placing salt in shoes, the shoe itself carried symbolic weight. Not simply as footwear, as the boundary between the self and the world. The shoe is what stands between you and the ground you walk on. It is what carries you across thresholds, from the known into the unknown, from the safe into the uncertain, from the interior of the home into the exterior of the world. Jung was deeply interested in threshold symbolism, because the threshold, in psychological terms, is not simply a physical boundary. It is the symbol of every transition, every moment of passage from one state of being to another. The threshold of the door, from sleep to waking, from private to public, from the person you are at home to the person you present to the world. The threshold of the significant relationship, from stranger to known, from known to intimate, from intimate to truly seen. The threshold of major life change, from one chapter to the next, from one identity to its dissolution and replacement, from the life you were living to the life that is trying to be born. Every threshold is a moment of vulnerability, of genuine exposure to the unknown, of the self crossing from what is familiar and contained into what is uncertain and open. And salt, placed in the shoes, placed at the very point of threshold crossing, is a psychological statement, not to the universe, not to supernatural forces, to the self. A deliberate, conscious, embodied declaration of the qualities you are choosing to carry across the threshold with you. Preservation. I will not dissolve into whatever I encounter out there. I will remain myself. Purification. I am releasing what has contaminated me. I am crossing clean. Truth. I will not perform. I will not pretend. I will be what I actually am in the world I am entering. Boundary. I know where I end, and the world begins. I will not lose myself in what I encounter. Permanence. There is something in me that does not change, that endures. That is mine regardless of what the world does with me today. This is what the ritual was doing. Not magic, not superstition. Psychological preparation for the act of moving through the world as a conscious, grounded, genuinely present human being. 3. Why Jung took ritual seriously when science dismissed it. Jung's position on ritual was one of the things that made him controversial among his scientific contemporaries. He refused to dismiss it, not because he was credulous, not because he believed in the supernatural mechanisms that folk traditions sometimes attributed to ritual practice, but because he recognized something that the purely rationalist dismissal missed entirely. Ritual works. Not through supernatural causation, through psychological mechanism. And the psychological mechanism is real and measurable and produces genuine effects in the people who engage with ritual seriously. Effects that no amount of rational analysis can replicate. Here is why. The conscious mind, the rational, analytical, linguistically dominant part of the psyche, operates primarily in the domain of concepts, of words, of logical relationships between ideas. It can understand a principle. It can agree with a proposition. It can decide rationally that something is true and that it should behave accordingly. And then, with remarkable consistency, it proceeds to not behave accordingly. Because the parts of the psyche that actually govern behavior are not the rational parts. They are the older parts, the deeper parts, the parts that predate language by hundreds of millions of years, the parts that operate not in concepts but in images, in sensations, in embodied, enacted, physically experienced reality. These parts, the parts that actually run the show, that actually determine how you feel when you wake up, how you respond when you are challenged, how you move through the world on any given day, cannot be reached by rational argument. They can only be reached by their own language, the language of symbol, of ritual, of embodied, physically enacted meaning. This is why you can know, rationally, completely, with full cognitive agreement, that you are worthy of love, that your past does not define you, that you are capable of change, and feel, in the body, in the morning, in the quiet moments before the rational mind gets fully engaged, none of those things. The rational mind agreed. The deeper self was not reached. Ritual reaches the deeper self. Because ritual speaks in the language the deeper self understands. Not argument, enactment. The performance of something with genuine intentionality, with full attention, with embodied presence, with the conscious understanding of what the symbol means, penetrates to levels of the psyche that words alone cannot access. This is what Jung understood that his rationalist contemporaries did not. And this is what the salt in the shoes is actually doing, when performed with genuine understanding. It is not changing the external world. It is communicating with the deep psyche in the only language the deep psyche reliably understands. 4. The specific psychological qualities salt represents. and how to actually cultivate them. Let's go deeper into each of the qualities the salt symbolizes. Because the ritual is not the point, the qualities are the point. The ritual is the vehicle, the qualities are the destination. And the person who understands the qualities, who cultivates them genuinely, who builds them into the actual architecture of how they move through the world, does not need the salt to be reminded of what they are carrying. They have become it. The first quality, preservation of the self. In Jungian terms, this is the capacity to remain psychologically intact in contact with the world, to move through environments, relationships, and experiences, without losing the thread of who you actually are. This sounds simple. It is not. Because the world is extraordinarily effective at dissolving the self. Every environment you enter has a pressure, a set of expectations, a pull toward a specific kind of person, a specific kind of behavior, a specific kind of performance. The workplace has a persona it requires. The family system has a role it has assigned you. The social group has a set of acceptable expressions and forbidden ones. The culture at large has a definition of a good person, a successful person, a worthy person, that may or may not have any relationship to what you actually are. And the person without the capacity for self-preservation, without the psychological equivalent of salt, dissolves into whatever container they find themselves in. They become what the workplace needs, what the family expects, what the social group rewards. Not through conscious choice, through the erosion of the self that happens when there is no genuine center to return to. The practice of self-preservation, cultivating the psychological quality that salt represents, is the practice of knowing your own center. Not as a concept, as a felt, embodied reality. The daily practice of returning to yourself, of knowing what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually value, beneath every performance, beneath every adaptation, beneath every response to external pressure. The journaling that nobody reads, the stillness that precedes the day, the honest internal question, asked and answered without reference to what anyone else needs the answer to be. Who am I today? What do I actually think about this? What do I actually feel about that? These are the practices of self-preservation, the building of the psychological center that allows you to move through the world without being dissolved by it. The second quality, purification. In Jungian terms, this is not moral purity, not the absence of sin or error. It is something more specific and more psychological. The regular, ongoing practice of releasing what has accumulated that is not yours. Because every day, in every interaction, in every environment, in every encounter with other people and their needs and their projections and their emotional states, things accumulate. Other people's anxieties that you absorbed without noticing, resentments that formed around interactions that were never fully processed, beliefs that were installed by the environment rather than chosen by you. Emotional residue from situations that were left unresolved. The specific, pervasive contamination of living in a world that is, at many levels, not aligned with what you actually are. This accumulation is real. It is present in the body, in the tension, the fatigue, the low-grade irritability that has no specific source, and it requires regular, deliberate release. Not through dramatic catharsis, not through the performance of spiritual cleansing. Through the genuine daily practice of asking, what is mine, and what have I been carrying that belongs to the world rather than to me? The meditation that allows the day's accumulation to settle and separate from the self. The physical movement that releases what the body has been holding. The conversation that allows what has been interior and unspoken to become exterior and heard. The time in genuine nature that provides the original perspective, the one in which the scale of daily concerns reveals itself as manageable. These are the practices of purification, not religious, psychological, real, necessary. The third quality, commitment to truth. This is the quality that Salt's covenant symbolism points toward. The binding of the self to honesty, not with others primarily, with oneself. Jung was more interested in self-honesty than almost any other quality, because he observed, with clinical precision, what the absence of it costs. The person who is not honest with themselves does not simply live with a slightly inaccurate self-picture. They live in a reality that is continuously, subtly, fundamentally distorted. Their relationships are shaped by what they need to believe about themselves, rather than by what is actually true. Their decisions are driven by the avoidance of self-knowledge, rather than by genuine understanding of their own needs and values. Their suffering is compounded by the energy required to maintain the comfortable narrative against the persistent evidence of the reality beneath it. The commitment to truth, the psychological quality that Salt's covenant symbolism represents, is the daily practice of choosing accurate perception over comfortable distortion. Asking the question, "What is actually happening here?" rather than the question, "What do I need this to be?" Receiving difficult feedback without immediately converting it into evidence for the narrative that protects the self-image. Noticing the gap, whenever it appears, between what you claim to value and what your actual behavior reveals that you value. And closing that gap. Not perfectly, not immediately, but consistently, as the direction of the life, rather than the arrival point. This is truth as a practice, not as a moral absolute. The daily, imperfect, genuinely costly commitment to seeing yourself and your life as accurately as possible. The fourth quality, boundary. The boundary that Salt marks at the threshold is not about keeping the world out. It is about knowing where you end. This distinction is crucial and consistently confused. The person who builds walls is not maintaining boundaries. They are avoiding contact. The person who maintains genuine boundaries is not avoiding contact. They are making contact possible. Because genuine contact, the real thing, the Jungian encounter between oneself and another, can only happen between two people who know where they end. The person without boundaries does not connect with others. They merge with them. They absorb the other person's emotional state, needs, perspectives, definitions of reality, and mistake this absorption for intimacy. But absorption is not intimacy. Absorption is the loss of self in the presence of another. And the person who has lost themselves cannot genuinely connect with anyone, because there is no self present to make contact. The practice of boundary, cultivating the psychological quality that Salt's threshold marking represents, is the practice of knowing, in each interaction, each relationship, each situation, where your responsibility ends and another's begins. What belongs to you and what belongs to the world. What you can offer genuinely and what you can only offer through self-betrayal. Where the yes that you mean ends and the yes that means no begins. These are not simple distinctions. They require the self-knowledge that the other practices build. They require the honesty that the commitment to truth develops. They require the centered self that the practice of preservation maintains. All four qualities support each other. All four are built together.